Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor was constantly speeding in the neighborhood. We put his car on a tree with a crane." My name is Taryn, and my neighbors and I hatched one of the greatest ideas ever when we all finally grew sick and tired of one reckless teen driving like a psychopath up and down our streets. We live in a small town of about 1,000 people. Many of us know each other from the years of growing up with the same families for generations. I live in a house with my grandma and mother in a quiet area of town with a longish road that runs throughout the neighborhood. We have many children and young people that live on my street. It's a popular area for kids wanting to ride bikes or skateboards because it is long and straight. Then one day, some teenager decided that he would make it his personal drag strip for his old souped up Honda. The kid's name was Dustin, and I used to babysit him when he was little. He was always a bit of a troublemaker, not liking to listen and enjoying all things that were dangerous or risky. The first thing that drew my attention to Dustin's behavior was the speeding up and down the street in his loud car at all hours of the day. But this made me realize what other things he was getting into. I found out through a friend of my grandmother's that Dustin's mother had not been home much because she had been staying with her boyfriend, basically giving the teenager free room to do what he wanted. We lived across the street from him, so I started paying more attention. I noticed that Dustin was having parties with dozens of other teens several days a week, not even always on weekends. I'm not even sure if he was attending school, to be honest. My grandmother could not sleep one night because of the loud music that he was playing. The kids' friends were throwing bottles and setting off some firecrackers, causing commotion till the early hours of the morning. One night, during a particularly loud party where a fight broke out, a neighbor called the police, finally fed up with all the rowdy weekends. The teens all ran, and somehow Dustin managed to get off the hook. Dustin and his friends did not really slow down on their antics and continued to keep the neighborhood up with the parties. We started to grow suspicious that he was also dealing drugs. At this point, he had dropped out of high school and was barely a legal adult. I actually felt bad for him, like Dustin was a good kid who probably just needed help. The drug dealing was discreet at first, but eventually I started to notice that the number of cars coming and going were increasing. Not to mention, the people driving to his house would speed up and down the streets. It was honestly dangerous. One day, they almost hit a few children who were trying to play ball outside. I was thinking about mixing some concrete and making my own speed bumps, which, by the way, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, is an absolutely brilliant idea in this situation. However, I'm also not really sure if that is legal in the first place. Probably not. Anyway, Dustin's direct neighbor was an elderly woman named Anne. She had lived here for over 40 years and was always a darling lady. I visit her once a week or so to bring her food and see if she needs anything from the store while I am out. She used to watch me and my little sister when we were kids and our mom had to work late. She was a single mom. I went to her place to do her weekly grocery run, and I noticed a ridiculous amount of trash and broken glass on her side of the property. It looked as if Dustin had not put his trash on the curb for weeks, and now it was spilling over onto her yard. There was also a large scorch mark going up the siding of Dustin's house. Smelly, burnt trash was sitting underneath it. And Son was at the house. He does not live there but comes by frequently to spend time with her. He held a bag of peas up to the left side of his face and was hovering over him worriedly. When I asked what happened, Tony and Son said that when he tried to talk to Dustin about the trash in his mother's yard, he became belligerent and punched him. Tony was talking about how he was going to sue Dustin if he did not clear up the trash and apologize for hitting him. Anne seemed genuinely upset, more upset than I had ever seen her. She started telling me how she was sick of everything with Dustin, that he was keeping her up at night, that one of his friends had tried to break into her house when he was drunk and forgot which ones was Dustin's. Apparently, they were burning trash the other night and almost caught his house on fire. That must be where the scorch mark came from. I look over and see Anne's eyes full of tears, fighting to let them fall. I needed to do something. I was pretty pissed at this point. Not only was I sick of this, but Anne was suffering. Plus, I had talked with several others on the street and they were just as tired of the drag racing, parties and broken bottles in the road. I marched over to Dustin's house, past bags of trash and broken bottles and banged on the door. It took several minutes and more times of banging before he finally answered. He was shirtless and pale with bloodshot eyes and an old smell of liquor on his breath. He is not even old enough to buy alcohol, so he must have a friend get it from him. Dustin narrowed his eyes at me. I can see him trying to remember who I am. He finally says, "What do you want, Taryn?" He sighs. "If this is about the trash, I'm going to get rid of it." Surprised me a little. I'm not his mom. I did not know why he was acting like I was. "Dustin, we need to talk about more than just the trash." He stood in the doorway with one of his arms holding him up as if he was too weak to just stand there on his own. He groans and rolls his eyes. "No thanks, I don't need another mom." Ha! That's funny, I thought. He goes to shut the door on me and I stick my foot in the way, keeping it open. "Hey, this is about Anne. Well, and the rest of the neighborhood." I pry the door open the rest of the way. "Frankly, we are sick of you. The drag racing, the parties, the drug dealing, all of it needs to stop." He laughed condescendingly. "You cannot tell me what to do." He tries to shut the door again, but I keep my foot in the way. "You can have off with this. Get off my property." He reached out and shoved me and made me lose my balance. I shouted profanities at him through the door and told him that if he kept it up, there would be some kind of hell to pay. I know it sounds silly, but I really needed to find a way to stop this kid before he killed someone. As I was walking back to my house, I realized one of the neighbors that lives on the end of the street has a large crane. How funny would it be if Dustin just happened to find his car up in a tree one morning? That is when I hatched my plan. I spoke with Eric, the guy with the crane, and started the process of putting Dustin in his place. Eric was completely on board. He was just as sick of everything as the rest of us. He told me that his granddaughter was riding her bike down the street one day and that Dustin's friend almost hit her when he was speeding away from his house. That night, Eric, his son and I got to work. We ended up hoisting his beat-up Honda on top of a dead old tree. It stayed up perfectly, as if a giant had just picked it up and set it there. It was absolutely amazing and honestly hilarious. I waited at my window all day, wanting to see what Dustin did when he realized that his car was missing. It was not that far away either. All he had to do was walk onto the street and look about 30 yards down and see his precious car precariously in a tree. My wait was worthwhile. His reaction was golden. He was speechless and then he started shouting profanities and other incoherent words. Dustin must have called the police because they showed up a few hours later to take his statement about the stolen car. The cops laughed too when they saw it. Eventually the news and newspaper came by to take pictures and see what happened with the troublemaking kid's car in a tree. The car ended up being removed from the tree and Dustin's behavior was quick to improve after that. He at least stopped driving like an idiot and there were no more friends speeding down the street. Trash was cleaned up from his and Anne's yard as well. It was a few months later that a knock came at my front door. It was shockingly Dustin. He seemed much more put together than he was the last time I saw him face to face. He apologized for everything and said that he has started picking up some groceries for Anne. But he leaves them on the porch because he is too embarrassed to tell her that he was sorry for everything. I told him that it was nice of him to say sorry and that he should do the same with Anne. I think that she would forgive him. Apparently sticking the boy's car in a tree was a helpful reality check. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, if I would have been in this situation as OP, putting this kid's car on a tree would definitely not have been the first thought that would have come to my mind. However, I gotta admit, it is pretty genius, and seemingly it worked really well. If you would have been in OP's shoes, would you have done something different? Or maybe did you have any better ideas? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could also like the video, because that would help my channel tremendously. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled, "Firing me was a mistake." This happened several years ago. I was working for a small medical supply company as the IT manager. Business was bad and eventually the IT department had to downsize to just me. During this time they brought in a new CFO that I had to report directly to. Let's call her Pam. Pam had zero knowledge of IT and how things worked. Her motto was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. PC/server life cycles did not exist. We don't have to pay for licensing to keep our firewall updated. It is working just fine now. I went from having an annual budget to a wish list which she would deny everything I asked for. The couple that owned the company were real pieces of work too. One time we had a quarterly meeting and people were asking about how secure their jobs were. The owners said that nobody was getting laid off and that our jobs were all secure. This was at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. The very next morning at 9 they laid off 6 people. At noon, one of the owners showed up to show off the Escalade that he had just purchased that morning. During the first 6 months that Pam was there, she started firing everyone that worked for the old CFO and replaced them with her friends and family. 3 of her bridesmaids from her wedding a few years prior got hired to replace those that she fired. I knew I was on borrowed time. After she had been there for 9 months, I was the only one left out of what was about a dozen people that worked for the old CFO. I knew my time was running out. I had been looking for work, but the 2009 crash just happened and the job market in my area went south quickly. Sure enough, she called me into HR and blindsided me with an entirely trumped up charge that she claimed happened the day before. I was working with the VP of sales on a project that entire day, so I had a witness. I asked to bring him in since my boss was lying and was told, "This is not about him, this is about you." Remember kids, HR is there to protect the business, not to do what is right or legal in some cases. Needless to say, I knew my days were numbered. The next morning I get introduced to an IT expert who just happens to be Pam's 21-year-old nephew. He was to shadow me and evaluate everything that I did to see if we could streamline any processes. In other words, they wanted me to train him to do my job. I quickly learned that this kid had absolutely no knowledge of IT. He is the kid people think is an IT expert because he can hook up a PlayStation to a TV. He did not even know how to join a PC to a domain, so I knew what had to be done. The inventory, billing and shipping and receiving were all run by scripts that I created on the server. They were all run using the domain admin account. I raised quite a fuss about giving him the domain admin account in front of Pam and him. I then loudly proclaimed that I was going to change the password to it, since you cannot have people who don't work for the company to have admin access to our network. I was overruled and was told to give it to him. I complied, but I also showed him multiple times how to change passwords on the domain. I even had him write it down to make sure that he could do it. I really stressed the importance of changing the admin password and deleting his local account the second he is no longer consulting with us to him. I showed him a few things, but nothing in regards to what really made the company run that day. There was not enough time in a year to bring this kid up to speed on how to run that place due to his complete ignorance of IT. I come into work the next day and sure enough, I was let go because her nephew had found my skills lacking in many areas. I collect my last paycheck and head home. The next morning I get a call from the CFO and owners. Apparently her nephew was not quite up to speed on everything we did there, and she was graciously offering to pay me my regular salary to come in as a consultant and get her nephew up to speed on the IT infrastructure. I told her that I was now an independent contractor, and if she wanted my services I was going to charge her $200 per hour with a 250-hour minimum. At that point she told me that she was going to call the police and have me arrested for what I did if I didn't come in and fix everything. My response was, just so we are clear, you fired me, replaced me with a completely unqualified idiot, and now you're threatening to call the cops on me if I don't come in and fix what he did? I will hold. please call the police and let me know what they said. She started cursing at me and hung up the phone. Turns out her nephew did actually learn something from me. He changed the admin password after I had left, the one that ran all the scripts for inventory, billing, shipping and ordering. According to some of my coworkers, the place was dead in the water for several days until they could get a real consultant in to go through the documentation that I had created and fix the issue. The nephew was immediately fired and Pam was gone within a month. And the next one is titled Awesome Petty Revenge. So, about a year and some change ago, my cousin was stationed at the Air Force Base close to my house and was living with us. He is a tool shopaholic. He says things are cheaper where I live. He finds 25 rolls of wire at almost 50% less than at the store. Obviously, my cousin thought it was a bargain. He made an offer and the guy accepted. We drive down an hour and this guy says he got a better offer. Naturally, my cousin gets pissed and bumped out. I told him we should totally mess with this guy. I got the same app and found the post. I made an offer for full price of the cable, which was steep. I cannot remember how much exactly, but it was more than $2,000. After messaging for hours and making him drive an hour past my house, he lives south, I live north, he tells me he is at the random store where we agreed to meet. So I blocked him. A few minutes later he messages my cousin telling him the buyer backed out. Cousin makes a counter offer even cheaper and the guy shows up at my house, gets less than 50% and unloads the cable for him. Cousin was not sad anymore. The next one is titled Revenge on Awful Manager. I work at a company that cleans buildings, windows, gutters, carpets, you name it. Old manager would bark orders at everyone while they did all the work. I am the on-site supervisor, but unlike other supervisors, I actually do the most dangerous, physically intensive jobs on site, involving ladders, machines, etc., while the other workers assist me. One day I did about 80% of the job single-handedly, while the manager and the others effed around all day. Later on I get written up. I found out she had taken credit for my work and lied, saying that it was I who was effing around, and the idiot boss believed her. I told them she was full of it, taking credit for my work, and I was going to quit. They begged me not to go and upped my pay. I was still pissed. Fast forward, we end up at a job where it is just the two of us. Instead of me doing everything, I make her do half the work. She ends up busting her back by falling down a window well, which is a job I usually do, and can no longer work the job. Well, so much for taking credit for my work. She couldn't do what I do every day for just one day. We have a better manager now and work is much better. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.